The objective of this webinar is to present our vision, our solution, our value proposition, a description of development life cycle on how we can go to US certification rapidly and while reducing risk and cost constraints. So I'm going to present myself before. So I am Amin El-Mrabti. I am one of the co-founder of AEROSPACE. I was the ex-CTO of AEROSPACE from 2016, 2019, and from 2019, I'm working on the business development of AEROSPACE solution, software solution of AEROSPACE. So our objective at AEROSPACE is to provide, so please, if you assist to the meeting, you can mute your micro if it is possible. I think everybody have micro which is mute, and I will accept all the people that are coming now. Okay, so I said that the main objective of AEROSPACE is to provide a set of software solution, software components, software framework process, to facilitate the access of the development of certified flight control. In fact, for most aircraft today, the flight controllers require specific features which is very hard to find relevant codes for them. So to fix this problem, AEROSPACE solution consists in providing some, as I said, a set of software solutions, development process, development environment, software codes, to facilitate and to simplify the access to manufacturer to the development of certified flight controllers. So AEROSPACE was created in 2016, and today there are 12 people involved in the company in Paris and in Grenoble. AEROSPACE team have mainly an embedded software background and a lot of experience in the development of certified software solution in avionics. Big experience in the development of inertial unit for avionics and for helicopters, in compliance with B178C up to DEL-A, and also experience in the development of software for in-manned aviation, especially ground control software and flight control software. AEROSPACE scope starts when the need for B178C for the whole of a part of the software is clear and is clearly identified. So, okay, I accept. Please, there is a sound here. I don't know. It's coming. So, as I said, AEROSPACE scope start when the manufacturer's scope of D178C, the scope of the need of D178 is well identified, and he will be identified when some activity will be realized, like safety analysis, and this need also will be dependent from the type of the operation, from the aircraft characteristics, and the role of AEROSPACE is to work closely with a manufacturer to apply those needs in the software part by implementing the appropriate software compliant to the 178C for the appropriate level of criticality. In the context of its scope, AEROSPACE provide 3 different products. We provide a process which is compliant to B178C called Submarino with the appropriate certification plans. We provide also Pulsar Factory, which is a developed development environment, which include all the appropriate tools to develop a D178C compliant software, also in compliance with Sovrano, and we provide also a software and off-the-shelf software, autopilot software for drones. And in Pulsar Factory, we can reuse a set of components from Pulsar to obtain a new tailor-made autopilot. And we will talk in more details on those solutions in the next slide, in the next presentation that we will present. But before I turn the floor over to Antonio to present ABIONICA and to switch on European regulation, and then I will finish with the presentation of the development lifecycle for certified US. Antonio,
thank you. Can you let me?
Yes, I think
great.
You have the possibility to share your screen.
So great. So good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar. I'll introduce myself. I'm Antonio Belmar. I'm founder of ABIONICA Solutions and Prime Core Systems, and being in this industry for almost 15 years. Actually, we would say that we started this industry when there was no application for a manned aircraft. So we had the aircraft, but we didn't have any application to put it to. And we've been there and for a long time working mainly in flight control systems, both the hardware and the software part, and architectural level. And after all that time, in 2018, I founded ABIONICA Solutions. And having all that background, you can see here, developing autopilot guidance systems, guidance ammunition, certified, first certified civil UAVs in Spain, for instance, and Europe, and also working in a smaller and different, bigger aircrafts. The company started working in the development of Targus OPV. It's an optionally piloted vehicle. It's a twin-engine, 1.2 tons aircraft. And our services are mainly cover our know-how covers autopilot control loss integration, development and integration, aerospace-grade flight control system design, development and integration, mainly integration, and consultancy and training services. I'll tell you a little more about that. So from the flight dynamics and GNC, we cover all the value chain from aircraft modeling and simulation to flight control integration and verification during flight testing, and obviously implementation of not just control laws but also guidance and navigation. From the aerospace-grade electronics design and development, we also cover the whole product life cycle, from system requirements to architecture assessment. We skip in this side, this part. Most of the times we outsource, or the customer outsources the development of the hardware, but we specify for them the hardware and software requirements. And but we cover also the let's say the supplier management, and we also cover with them the integration, verification, validation activities. And the consultancy and training services, most of the most common services we provide are related to conceptual studies, so conceptual phases like trade-off studies, feasibility studies, and other support. Advisory services regarding the market, so how the market for certain products is there, because as we said, we gather a lot of information and experience from the US market in general. And the training, because most of the manufacturers, and we'll talk about that during the presentation of the US certification, most of the manufacturers, they lack of certain processes implemented in their organizations, so we help them embrace those processes. We customize those processes for them, so we help them grow as their product grows, right? So some say initial inputs related to the UA certification. So So what's the certification, first of all? Well, it's a process where it is demonstrated that the aircraft type meets safety requirements. The design organization selects or builds a set of certification specifications. I'd say those are the basis, and agrees with authorities. It's just kind of negotiation process where the manufacturer says, okay, these are my specifications, and I want to design something based on that. And the authorities say, okay, if you develop something, you demonstrate me that this is what you have in the end, I will allow you to fly. It's not as simple as that, but more or less is the short story of it, right? You can say here that in the end is some standards or some certification specifications demonstrating compliance with an aircraft design. So, and then the design organization must show this compliance, as we said, and not just at the end of the project, and this is very important, but along this whole design and development process. So it may sound like any other certification process, but it has its own peculiarities. We'll talk about that later on. So you can see in the center of this slide that there are three main new categories that the EASA, European Aerospace Safety Agency, identified and implemented and classified. And those three are related to the risk of operation. You know that the legacy manned aviation regulations are based on or classified based on maximum takeoff weight of the aircraft and type of aircraft and maximum takeoff weight. But for this UAS, the approach is different, and the classification is based on the risk of the operation. So open category, for example, shows the lowest risk level, and its certification is mainly allocated to a CE marking process. So it's like it's more related to the consumer product rather than a typical certified product as we know it. Certified category, in contrast, will follow similar approaches to the one used for manned aviation. And finally, the specific category gathers a proportional approach between risk of the operation and the robustness of the UAS. The operator, the manufacturer, and the maintenance organization. So robustness is called the level of assurance and level of integrity of each one of the actors playing and key actors, key stakeholders of this process. And what about certified category? Well, this certified category is being issued a set of special conditions, as you can see on the bottom here, gathered under special conditions like UAS recently, last summer and the beginning of the year. Those are the beginning of that what has to be the future of CS like UAS. So from a special conditions should be approved and should mature till we get a certification specification for the like UAS. It's expected to be released by 2022 or 2023. And sorry. And so what happens with the I think there's some echo there. No. So apart from this, they have the So other aircrafts also that are already there, special conditions are for eVTOL, and you've heard recently those air taxis are still there, and the process will be more or less the same. As you may know, air taxis has a lot of common with manned aircrafts in the end, especially with say taking specifications from commercial aviation and trying to shrink them into smaller aircrafts, lighter aircrafts, and with higher complexity. Both of them came from the joint process initiated by ICAO here and handled by EASA, EUROCAE, and JARUS. And in this case, working in a new technical standard guidelines practices that later may be part of the new acceptable means of compliance and guidance materials or the basis for the new certification standards. These new regulations are already in place in the European Union and some additional countries following EASA directives, which provides a wide and expanding market among the ones who want to work on the certified product using those directives. So you can see that we are not just talking about one country regulations, we are talking about the whole continent. And as far as I know, also the countries are trying to embrace the same approach. So what about the certification process? Okay, for most of the manufacturers that want to jump into this new industry, it's a double project. It's a dual project. They have to start not just for the certification of the aircraft, but also certification of the organization. And this is really, really important because sometimes when we do our initial estimates, we lack of this other part, let's say the organization, and normally we get short of it. And normally what we do in any development project is that we gather requirements from our customer, right? But at the same time, in this case, for this industry, we should also take a look at authorities and what the regulations are telling us. Because if we don't have an initial and good starting point from both sides, we will not be able to success on the project of on the process of developing the organization and the project and the product at the same time. So because some organizations design and develop brilliant aircraft systems, and once it is developed, they go for the certification authorities, expecting some kind of test campaign to get certification. And unfortunately, as you may know, the aerospace sector does not work like that. And it may require the identification of a set of safety requirements that will be agreed with authorities from the very beginning of the project. So unfortunately, some of them, they get to the end and say, hey guys, let me just start flying my aircraft. And they say, no, but have you accomplished you have a certification plan? What are your certificate bases? And sometimes this lack of information will force them to make huge changes, major changes in the aircraft design that will cost very, I mean, those are very expensive along the whole project. So that's the only way to be able to develop a certified product in the aerospace industry. So taking these two stakeholders in mind and being able to develop this whole two projects at the same time. Doesn't have to be a DOA under Part 21, could be also a Part 21 Lite, which will be released anytime soon by EASA, which is a light version of the traditional Part 21 for the design organization and the production organization. And ABIONICA in all this process can help helps our customers on the identification of these regulations and these type certificate basis, talking with authorities, and starting developing the plan for the development of the project in order to make it successful. So what about the technical side, right? What about the key context of it? So one of the key aspects we cover with our customers is the systems specification and design, because the UAS are generally very complex systems with plenty of different units, items, components that must work together to provide functionalities that until now were not just covered in big commercial aircraft, such as fly-by-wire concepts or TCAS, a typical traffic collision avoidance system, now really commonly known as detect and avoid or sense and avoid. Those are systems that were traditionally used in commercial aviation, and now they're applied into this new industry. So most of these systems are not available in the market. So if they are, they lack of required qualification, because most of the manufacturers, OEM manufacturers, they just provide you something that is functionally comply with that, but not from the safety point of view. So that makes the design process even more difficult and eventually more expensive. At the same time, all these developments must have happened under a boring and bureaucratic set of guidelines that the organization shall be compliant with, which is the ARP 4754, which is a really good set of guidelines in order to accomplish all the processes and procedures you may need to go for, and will be aligned with the DOA, the Design Organization Approval process. So you can see here some of the procedures that could be implemented in the system. I'm not going to get any in detail along all of them, but just for you to see that there is a really complicated air quality system they want to have to implement in the organization. And I will tell you that our main contribution in our customers' project is supporting their system design process and all the related activities that help them develop exactly the product they want and avoiding any risk, extra time or cost. Thanks to our experience in this, let's say, context of US industry and developing similar projects, and our know-how from the market. So that is why in this industry, safety and quality are key. We talk about authorities that they have to take them in consideration from the very beginning of the project. We talk about the type certificate basis. We talk about how complex the system is. And the problem is that it may sound ridiculous, but safety and quality will save you time and money in the whole project. and yeah, as we said, it may sound ridiculous because you could say, okay, I want to do something, I develop a prototype, I will not take care of quality, I will not take care of safety, I want to develop something as fast as possible. But the problem is that if you don't consider those parts at the very beginning, from the very beginning, and you don't implement that at least iteratively or incrementally in your project, it will be difficult for you to accomplish the final product that you want to have. I mean, you don't want to fly, you want to sell something, you want to sell a product. So that's why sometimes it's difficult to end up with the desired product if you're not considering those two key parts, right? So you can see here that how quality or design assurance, systems and equipment, and safety requirements must roll together in your projects to provide not just a certifiable product, but a reliable and viable solution to the aerospace market. So fortunately, there was no, so that's here, I've shared this with you because I wanted to show you a couple of examples of how things shouldn't be done, right? So how things could be, projects could be really, really expensive. The first one, this first case, ended up is a cargo drone that ended up falling onto a nursery's playground. This is how it fell there, and but well, trying to deliver some cargo, I guess, or performing some flight tests. Fortunately, there was no kit when that happened, so well, no big consequences. But the consequence is that they were banned from flying again in that country. So doing things really fast, let's say, trying to avoid safety and quality, has really tremendous consequences. The second one is a singular V2 aircraft configuration. It's manned, as you can see. That was using RC components to build up their product. Obviously, the product was developed very fast, but during one of their exhibitions, they crashed and almost killed the flight test pilot. So you can see that the consequences were really tragic. Could have been really tragic. And this is just what is made public. But I can assure them that there are plenty of projects that even though they have the resources and brilliant ideas to implement, they realize too late of the way forward. That is why we have developed a set of procedures, guidelines, and in summary, development approaches that avoid wasting time and money, not just from the organization point of view, but also from the systems architecture strategy point of view. I'll tell you some tips regarding the project development cycle. So never forget that when you're developing a product, you're also developing an organization. Take into account these two main stakeholders, authorities and your customers. Consider quality as the cost of not having quality, because it's very expensive not to have quality in such projects. And try to implement that in a gradual way, because I mean, starting with a really heavy quality system from the very beginning could be dramatic. Cost of changes is very important. So develop your project in such a way that changing something when the project is pretty advanced is not so expensive. So let's say that in other words, leave the software changes to the end. That will be a really good strategy to implement in your project. Try to use as much as possible model-based design, because it's a good example. You are building, this is now really hype, you know, the word, the digital twin. You're trying to do something in an environment where nothing will be broken, and there are no consequences, and it's really cheap. So you will identify requirements that probably you haven't identified from the very beginning. It's really valuable, and shortens a lot your development process. Show project life cycles. Try to do iterative, incremental, or agile. Those are, even though may sound against quality or against safety, could be implemented in such a way that will be compliant with the safety standards. And ABIONICA, in the end, what we do is we tailor all these processes and these procedures in order to help organizations to develop that approach in let's say, a smart way in order to avoid any risk that may happen. So, and finally, I wanted to share with you this specific category and how certified UAS could be applied there. As you may know, certification process is generally, talking about certified categories, so big aircrafts or eVTOL, is really expensive. You need a big team, you need a lot of time, you need plenty of discussions with the EASA, you have to develop your organization and your product at the same time is really, really expensive and cost consuming and time consuming. But there's a sweet spot, let's call it. With these new regulations, we have a new category called the specific category, where certification of the aircraft is not going to be, or at least is expected not to be so heavy, so much expensive. So, well, for those who don't know anything about the specific category, how to assess or identify that your aircraft is in under a specific category is going through the CONOPS and the SORA assessment. So the CONOPS, with the CONOPS of your aircraft or your operation or intended operation, you go through a process called the SORA, the Specific Operations Risk Assessment, where you analyze the risks and you will get like a side level. This side level goes from 1 to 6, and I will tell you, if you go beyond 6, means that your aircraft will right away get into the certified category. So there's nothing you can do there. You have to certify the way we are certifying manned aircrafts. But if you go in between 1 and 6, you have a proportional, let's say, as I said before, requested level of robustness proportional to the risk of the operation. And obviously, and that's a good thing, when you go not just 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 are mainly requesting higher level of robustness to the operator, but when you get into 3, 4, 5, and 6, more and more is requested to the UAS, the manufacturer, and the rest of the organizations involved in the UAS side. So the key point here is, okay, that's the question, right? How we can take all this know-how from the certified category, so the UAS, the traditional manned aviation, and apply that in a light way to this specific category. And the answer is, obviously we can do that. We can simplify all these processes in order to implement something similar to the ERP 4754A, even exactly that one, which actually will be explicitly requested by the objectives of the SORA assessment. And we'll have to deal with all the context of this industry, which is like this type certificate will be restricted just for the operation we have defined in our CONOPS. Is first of all, we are not talking about that full certification for the aircraft, but just restricted to the operation. We have to deal with many products, items, components that will be COTS, and most of them will not be qualified. As I can see here, I see here without pedigree, with non-pedigree products. We have to accept that, and we have to try to push for a short product life cycle. So the whole product life will be short, because innovation is really fast in this industry. We have to deal with that, and there will be many changes along the life of this aircraft. So this is another typical conditions that make this new industry that will be developed under a specific category. But at the same time, okay, we have all these handicaps in this industry, but we have plenty good applications, and like cargo drones, as you can see, many typical products, famous brands, and autonomous applications. And in the end, the certification process for the UAS will simplify a lot the SORA assessment, the CONOPS, all this process for your operator, which in the end, if you're the manufacturer, your operator will be your direct customer. And I think that's all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Antonio. So now I will present in more details our proposition of life cycle to design and produce a certifiable UAS. The outline, I will explain first the main difficulties, why we want to propose this solution, then macro presentation of the development life cycle, then the iterative design process philosophy, and then I'll present Pulsar Factory, which is AEROSPACE solution for drone prototyping first, and then to produce a certified flight controller. And in this part, we will focus only on the certification of the flight controller subsystem. So today, the main difficulty that are facing the manufacturer are related to the possibility to be in compliance with the new regulation rapidly and with a reasonable cost, and to be able to improve the time to market. However, today we know that the traditional development process are slow and expensive. So there is a gap between the need to go rapidly to certification and the actual processes of certification that exist today, which are slow and expensive. And there are also some problems which are directly related to flight controller development due to drone diversity, because we need some specific components, some specific autopilot for each drone. And it's really difficult to find a codes, generic codes that we can deploy on different drone frames. And there are also a difficulty in the organization of the teams, of the manufacturer teams, software manufacturer teams, flight controller manufacturer teams, because when we need to target certification, we need a very specific skills. And generally, we can't find those skills, those complete skills in those organizations. We need skills on requirement design, on model-based design, on software, on mastering the standard, the certification standard. And from the experience that we have in discussion with the manufacturer, we have generally difficulty in finding all those skills at the same time in the manufacturer teams. So that's why we propose this development life cycle. This is a macro version of this life cycle that we propose, which is made of three main steps. The first step concerns the definition of the preliminary system design, which is defined to target rapid drone prototyping. So the main objective of this development life cycle is first to go rapidly to a prototype of a drone with a flight test to validate some development. And second, to go also rapidly once the prototype is validated from the prototype to the certification with a reasonable cost. And also to allow the manufacturer to improve the prototype by applying an iterative and an incremental design. So those are the main advantages of this development life cycle. Design a prototype that we can test in flight, offering the possibility to enhance the prototype by applying an iterative and incremental process, and then going rapidly to the certification once the prototype is validated. So here we can see the activity that HYONOS and ABIONICA could provide for each step. For the first step, I think Antonio talked about some activities in the last presentation. For example, for the system design, for the system architecture, we can define a preliminary system architecture that we are going to apply to test with a real flight test through the implementation of the control and command laws, through their integration and through a test fly, which embed those control and command laws using HYONOS Pulsar Factory. And then we can validate that. We can go back to the first step to enhance the design, to take into account another safety design, for example, and then iterate to get a prototype, a complete drone prototype. Once the prototype is validated, the cost to go to certification, we will explain that in the next slides, will be really fast and easy, without asking experience and without asking the manufacturer to be expert in the standards in the EU178C for the software part, or the EU254 for the hardware part. So for the first step, I will let Antonio maybe explain some elements, and then I will proceed by explaining the step 2 and 3.
Thanks, Amin. Yeah. Well, the whole thing about this process is that the risk, obviously, cost of changes, implementation of quality and design assurance along the whole process. So the idea is that, okay, if we develop, let's say, using a typical waterfall approach for the project, our product, it will take a lot of time, obviously, but I'm sure, and I can tell you that for sure, it will be almost impossible that from the very beginning you're going to have all the requirements. That from the very beginning you're going to end up with the right system architecture. That from the very beginning you're going to end up with the right items and the qualification level and the type certificate basis. So the way to go forward in this way, and we've done this bit several times already, is doing that in an incremental iterative way. We are suggesting this agile approach that help us first go as soon as possible to the flight test, and run the process. So it's not just one B model. You're probably familiar with the MIL model, but it's like doing that in an iterative way, digging deeper after each one of the iterations. The idea is that, first of all, you are identifying those risks from the very beginning and you tackle them first. You simplify the design and development process, and you have a functional test bed from the very beginning. So that's a really good thing, because you may have requirements on your mind, you may have written them or modeled them or all that stuff. You have even used model-based design, you're testing them, but until you don't get and you do certain flight tests, you cannot validate them properly. So the idea is that to start with a pure functional prototype of your aircraft, could be full size, full scale, or a scaled down version, and you will be from time to time implementing and de-risk your project and trying to freeze part of these parts. How to do that? Okay, so this is one example. So imagine that we start with we want to reach a functional prototype. With this functional prototype, we're gonna validate those user requirements. We're gonna run the whole process once, but just covering the highest level. So just identifying the system architecture. Okay, we'll have a functional architecture with this prototype. We'll have a performance evaluation. We can test in the actual with the actual physics that everything is working fine. We can validate our models for the aircraft. We can validate models for the physics of the actuators, propellers, blades, rotors, whatever. We will do some feasibility and trade-offs. We will see that that's the performance we are expecting, or there are some solutions that would be better using that and one solution or the other. And that will give you a preliminary aircraft safety assessment. So that should end up identifying that a preliminary aircraft safety assessment will be accomplished. So in the end, you will identify all the functionalities that obviously will come from the user requirements and aircraft requirements and system requirements that should be assessed, identified, and classified depending on the criticality. Right? You're familiar with the safety assessment. That's how it goes. So the next step, okay, you have already tested and validated your user requirements. Then you go for the system requirements. In this case, you are getting deeper in your V model, in your loop, let's say, and then you are freezing some more stuff. You're probably freezing the system architecture. You're probably freezing. You're probably performing a preliminary system safety assessment for your system. You are already identifying, and at the same time, you're training your organization. So the good thing is that doing that in such a way will not just help you de-risking the project and the product development, but also will give you, will allow you to grow the capabilities and the processes inside your organization. Because the deeper you go, the more, let's say, the higher, the more intensive is the application of design assurance processes and other processes that are aligned with the ERPs. So this is just another example. Imagine that after this second iteration, we end up with something that will allow us to identify the item requirements. Then we can freeze, for example, the hardware specification and item level safety analysis. So in the end, in this stage, we'll be able to say, okay, this is our system architecture, everything is there, but we still need to find out if certain functions will be implemented in this way or the other way around. Because this is most of the times the part that takes longer to be, let's say, decided or allocated. hardware as software implementation, which is the bottom of the V model, which in the end is the the most time demanding and cost demanding of all the activities. In this case, we'll be sure that all the risk, or at least most of them, will be really mitigated, because we've been through a process iteratively. So all the system, all the specifications, all the requirements are already specified, validated, and clear for us. So in the end, we'll be sure that having this final hardware software specifications, we'll be able to perform the implementation and the codification, and we'll be sure that we're going to end up with a certified product. So as you can see here, it's a lean approach to do it in such a way that we'll be training the organization, and at the same time we'll be developing the UAS, gathering all the information we need from time to time. Thanks. I think that's all from my side.
Thank you, Antonio. So then you're going to proceed to see the prototyping in the certified phase, but we will focus at this level on the flight controller part and how we can implement with the lean methodology a tailor-made flight controller for drone. So Pulsar Factory, the main advantages of this solution is that this solution helps to mix both COTS and custom software advantages. That means that Pulsar Factory will be an environment which embed a set of COTS components proposed by HYONOS, implemented and proposed by HYONOS. And this environment gave the opportunity to the customer to implement its own component. They could be a software component or model component that the manufacturer could simulate with her teams. And then the Pulsar Factory give the opportunity to integrate those new components with the actual existing component to provide a new tailor-made autopilot flight controller. That means that the manufacturer could reuse up to 80% of Pulsar COTS. And the component-based architecture of Pulsar could help us really to interface easily the software component provided by the manufacturer and the existing software component provided and already implemented by HYONOS. Each component, in fact, has its own inputs, outputs, and responsibility. And as long as they are respected, the manufacturer can adapt the behavior of the component and integrate easily its component. This could help the manufacturer to reuse maximum of existing software component from Pulsar and to integrate only the component which is in relation with the specificities of its frame. This methodology also allows the manufacturer to go fastly to the prototype. That means when we integrate a model, that means that we will generate a real code that we will integrate with the existing component, and we will generate a true binary flight controller that we can embed on the hardware, and we can go to a flight test rapidly. And using this platform, we can early identify the problem and we can correct them really early in the process. This is the philosophy of Pulsar Factory. Produce your own specific component, and Pulsar Factory is the framework to integrate them and to build the appropriate software that we can test with a real flight test. So this is what I said. So the main three advantages of Pulsar Factory for drone prototyping. What we need to keep in mind. Pulsar Factory for prototyping gives you the opportunity to implement your own component, which could be flight control laws design or some improvement of some component. You can rapidly integrate them to go to flight test. while reusing a set of software, already software component. You can deploy this software in an existing hardware, which is low-cost or breakable hardware. We don't need at this step to use a certifiable hardware. So those three advantages help manufacturer to reduce the cost by reusing maximum of software component of Pulsar software component, to reduce the time because he will focus only on his specific software component. The possibility to embed this software on an existing breakable and low-cost hardware allow the manufacturer to reduce the cost, to control the time, also to go rapidly to flight test. And the fact that we can go from the development of a specific component to flight test rapidly, and when I'm talking about a rapid process, it's a question of days if everything is well configured. We will see after that what are the steps in the installation of Pulsar Factory. So the fact that we can go rapidly to flight test, it could be good to control time because we are going to find earlier the problems, and we have the opportunity also to enhance the specific components, and also we can mitigate the risks on identifying also the problem earlier in the process. So how Pulsar Factory works really? So those are the different steps inside Pulsar Factory, from the first discussion between the manufacturer and HYONOS to the certification, the delivery of a certified flight controller. But in this slide, we will focus only on the prototyping phase. So at the beginning, we will start by step to configure Pulsar Factory. We will exchange with the manufacturer to adapt Pulsar Factory to the specific drone. We will discuss about what are the specific components that the manufacturer would like to implement, what are the interfaces of those components, what are, for example, the sensors that the manufacturer would like to use, what are the communication protocols. So we will discuss on several topics. We will get maximum of information. HYONOS, after that, based on those information, will install Pulsar Factory for the manufacturer teams. That means we will install the appropriate tools, the set of software component that the manufacturer want to reuse, the tools that allow the manufacturer to integrate his own component, the tool chain, the appropriate tool chain to build and to embed the software on the appropriate hardware. In fact, we are going to install the environment to let the manufacturer autonomous from the implementation of its own component to the flight test. And then the manufacturer will be autonomous in the implementation of the specific components. And as we said, Pulsar Factory support the model-based implementation based on Simulink model or component implemented with C and ADA. And the manufacturer could start a development process in which he could implement and validate. That's me. I implement, I integrate, I'm going to do flight test, and then I'm going to enhance my component, then doing another flight test until the validation of the software component implemented in the prototype phase. This is for how it works really, and this is a true use case that in which one of our customers, one of our partners used the Pulsar Factory. For example, the first steps in which we define together the flight controller interfaces and all the necessary data inputs that we need to configure to install Pulsar Factory took about 1 week. 7 weeks to install Pulsar Factory and to to support, to train the manufacturer team to use Pulsar Factory and to produce the first specific component. And in this use case, the targeted specific component was only the flight control laws, and there was implemented with Simulink. So this phase took about 7 weeks, and the integration and the flight test for each integration, it took 2 days. For the flight test, it took also 2 days. And once those steps are finished, the manufacturer is autonomous to go back here to enhance the flight controller prototype and to go then to integration and to do flight. This is a true use case, so in which we can see that going rapidly to flight test is question of week if we use a maximum of software component, and we will focus only on our specific components. Then we will go to Pulsar Factory. How are you going to use in Pulsar Factory to implement, to develop the certified version of the flight controller in compliance with the 178C? So Pulsar Factory will be different in the certification phase. That means that we will integrate all the activities that required to get the certification. And in Pulsar Factory, embed a process called Submarino that we developed also, which is a D178C compliant software development process already used in the development of Pulsar software and Pulsar component. That means that the component that manufacturer reused in the prototyping phase are already certified. That means that in the certification phase, we will provide all the artifacts, the certification artifacts of those components. And the cost of the certification and the time to get the certification will be reduced because the reused component are already done respecting this process. So Submarino is a process that we defined, that we described in certification plans. The certification plans were approved by authorities, and Pulsar Factory will be the environment in which we have all the appropriate tools to implement all the activity of Submarino process. So Submarino process, also one of the main advantages of using the process is not a recycle classic D178 process. It's an iterative and incremental process. It targets a continuous certification process. That means that each function that we are going to implement, at the end, we will produce all the certification, all the needed certification artifacts. This is very important because it could help us to implement certified data while the requirement, the system requirement are not finished. And this is very important to accelerate, to reduce the time, reduce the time of certification. We are not going to be blocked until the system requirement will be finished. No, we can work with some function, and the process respect this philosophy. This process describes all the activities of the 178C, from high-level requirement to software delivery, and goes up to DAL-A. The fact that we support also the integration of Simulink model, we developed in Submarino, we developed the activities to be compliant with the standard, with the complement DO331, which target the model-based design. So as I said, Pulsar Factory for the certification phase will be the development environment, which includes all the tools to develop the 178C compliant software, which is not the case for the prototyping phase. In the prototyping phase, we need just the environment, the tools to integrate the component and to go to the flight test. That's all. But when we switch to certification at this moment, we need to integrate all the tools to be able to develop all the certification data. And the Pulsar software and Pulsar software component reused in the prototyping phase, and which will be also reused in the certification phase, they are already implemented respecting this process. So the certification artifact and data are already developed and present, and we can deliver them to the manufacturer of a drone when he will present the certification data to the certification authorities. So the main activity to put into practice in Pulsar Factory for certification are mainly two activities. The manufacturer team, with the support of HIONOS, they need to produce the certification artifact of only the new specific components that were implemented in the prototype phase. That is, respecting Submarino process. So there is no need to re-implement the certification data for the reused component, only producing the certification data for the new component. So for this activity, HIONOS could support the manufacturer to put into practice Submarino, to understand the process, to configure the process, to adapt the process, not adapting the process, but to help the team to be autonomous on the application of the process. And then we can deploy after that the software with all the artifacts in the flight controller architecture based on certified hardware. That means that as an input, we need to start certification activities using Pulsar Factory. We need two main inputs. We need the flight controller system architecture based on the safety analysis, like Antonio said before. For example, when we are going to apply risk analysis, we could have a conclusion that we need a duplex architecture or triplex architecture. So we need this definition of this architecture, and we need also a system requirements that we need to implement and to produce the high-level requirement, which are the first data that we need to provide when we implement software in compliance with DO-178C. And we need also the data that we developed in the prototyping phase. That means that those data, we are going to reuse those data. We are not going to start from scratch the implementation of those components. So there is a link between this deployment on the architecture based on certified hardware and the flight controller system architecture. And at this level, also in Pulsar Factory, we have a partner which provide DO-244 compliant hardware, and we proved that our software could be deployed on those hardware. So we are going to define the architecture around those hardware choices. And then we can go to flight test and maybe refine the flight controller system architecture or improve some system requirement. And we will be in an iterative and incremental process also. The iterative and incremental process is really important in the drone certification process, and as we remarked, we talk about that at different level, in the macro process level, and the prototyping level, and the certification level, and even in Submarino we are in an iterative and incremental process. So to resume the advantages of using Pulsar Factory to produce a tailor-made flight controller or certified flight controller. So the importance of using Pulsar Factory, the main advantages is to reduce cost. reducing cost because we are going to reuse a maximum of already certified component, because we are going also an well-defined and an already defined process. The manufacturer isn't going to define a new process compliant with the 178C. The process is ready, and a great part of the software component is also ready. So we need just to certify, to develop the certification artifact for the new component. This have also an impact, a direct impact on the time control, on the risk mitigation, and an important thing also on the manufacturer autonomy. We give with Pulsar Factory the opportunity to the manufacturer to produce their own components IP. And with the training on the process, they could be autonomous to modify the flight controller in the future and to apply new enhancement. So they would use by autonomously the process to enhance the process, to enhance the software, the flight controller software. So here, if we go back to the workflow, to the Pulsar Factory workflow, so once the prototyping phase is validated, we will go back to discuss with the manufacturer on how we are going to configure the Pulsar Factory, but this time for certification. We will discuss about maybe the new system architecture. We will discuss about system requirement, the flight controller system architecture, and if there are new needs on sensor redundancy or new sensor that we are going to integrate. So we will discuss on the new configuration of Pulsar Factory to adapt the new needs for certification. And then we will install Pulsar Factory again, but at this level, we will install all the appropriate tools to be in compliance with Submarino process, and we will make some training to the manufacturer team if the manufacturer would like to be autonomous on its development and on the enhancement of its software. Once the installation is done, we can go to the certification phase, in which we are going to produce concretely the certification artifacts for the new components, and while respecting the 178C up to DAL A, that means that we can support DAL B, DAL C. We support also the DO331 complement, which is specific to the model-based design, and then the DO332 also, which is a set of guidelines to address some vulnerabilities when using object-oriented technology. And then you are going to get an operational certified software if all those activities are done. So in conclusion, the main point that we need to keep in mind for me are 3 points. Importance of rapid prototyping with flight test. This is an important point if you want to go to produce a certified US. It is very important to put a strategy to go rapidly with a prototype to flight test. This is very important to mitigate and to overcome early in the process the difficulty and the risks. Then the second message is finally developing a certifiable flight controller and a tailor-made one without being an expert in certification and in particularly in DO178C standard and at a reasonable cost is possible. Yes, it's possible. We proved that with Pulsar Factory. Using Pulsar Factory, we can be not expert in DO178C, but we can produce a tailor-made and certified software in compliance with DO178C up to DAL A. And finally, if we have this opportunity to produce an easy and fast certification of flight controller, this is a potential, and this gives new opportunities to manufacturers to address new markets. Those are the 3 main messages in conclusion of this presentation. So I don't know if I respect the time. I think that no. So if you have question,
we
are
never
open
respect
to
the
get
time.
questions.
Don't worry. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
it's okay. So if there's any question, I think they can share through the chat, or they can. What do you think? I mean, or they can just speak up.
Yes, if you want. Yes, in the chat or.
Nobody's typing anything. I think nobody understood what we're saying. We have to improve our English, I think.
If you want without a chat, if someone wants to ask a question directly, it's also possible.
Okay, I'll tell you something else about that. So just to shoot with the first question. So we are talking about iteratively being able to implement something. Well, we got a question already.
I don't see the chat. Okay, yes, okay.
They can share the video. Okay.
Thank you for the
confirmation. So the idea would be that the manufacturer can start flying as soon as possible. They can build a prototype, and they can implement the, let's say, solution. Let's call it a software solution on top of using Pulsar Factory, on top of a libraries, modules, blocks that are already pre-qualified. That will simplify the whole process for them. At the same time and in parallel, so we're decoupling here the functionalities of the aircraft from the safety requirements, which is key. Because at the very beginning, what you gather from your customer are the requirements. You don't have any safety requirements. We got a question for you. I mean.
Okay, so just curious about the Pulsar Factory. Is it a software or what? So Pulsar Factory is a development environment. So it is a set of tools, a set of software that we deploy in a single framework, and in which we will apply a set of activity in compliance with the submarine process, which is a process in compliance with D178C. So Pulsar Factory is a set of tools to let the teams autonomous to enable all the activities in compliance with D178C. So it's a set of configuration management tool. It's a set of test framework. It's a set of development framework, of building framework, of continuous integration framework, of handling requirements. Are your tools certified? So, in fact, when we define certification plan, and depending on the level of criticality of that we target with the DO178C, there are a set of tools which need to be qualified. We don't need about certified tools. We need about qualification of tools. So yes, Pulsar Factory should include some qualified tool and qualification in compliance with DO330. So we have different level of TQL, and depending on the level of targeted level of criticality of the DO178C, we integrate the appropriate tool with the appropriate qualification level of the tools. I don't know if it's clear for this question. Thank you. So, thank you, sir. So, it is like set of tool chain that required for developing the flight control law up to DAL 8. It just means that we need separated training for using that tool chain. So, the training is really to explain how the workflow, to explain the set of activity that the teams need to apply. That's mean, I can give an example. When we are in the certification phase in User Factory, we developed in the prototyping phase a component NC that we tested in the flight test. What are the artifact, the certification artifact that we need to implement in the certification phase? Let's suppose that in our safety analysis, we said, okay, this flight controller need to be in compliance with D178C DALC. So when we have this information, we need to generate, for example, we need to develop the software data, which are the high-level requirement, the low-level requirement, the test procedures, the test cases around this code. And those are some parts of the certification data. And Pulsar Factory will contain all the appropriate tools to implement those data. We will get the requirement handler tool to produce the requirement. We will get the framework test to produce the test procedures and the test cases. We will integrate the integration continuous framework to integrate the automatic test and to generate the test results. And we will build this environment for you to generate the appropriate data, so that at the end we will get all the necessary certification data for your specific component. That means that the final software will contain those artifacts and the software artifacts that we have developed and that we will provide to you if you reuse some of the components that Pulsar Factory contains also.
Yeah, one more thing I wanted to share too regarding what you said. I mean, is that just to put everything in context, is that when you're gonna do the first iteration, you probably have functional requirements. So you implement those functional requirements as flight control laws, whatever. You go fly, whatever, and you have validated them, they work properly. The second one, you have probably more requirements, not just dealing with, I'm just making up, right? Just inventing the situation. Not just functional requirements, but you also have requirements regarding fail-safe approach, monitoring. You are voting algorithms inside your system. You have, let's say, error injection. You are testing all that. You have more requirements. So as you can see, your zero requirements will be increasing every time. But after each one of the, let's say, design, development, implementation, verification, validation loops, after each one of these loops, these cycles, you will end up with the required artifacts and in the end, the DO178C data pack. That's a good thing about it. You put the right requirements, you build the right software, and you will end up with the qualification required. Am I right, Mamin?
Yes, okay. You're right. Yes, so another question on D178C are applied over avionics, but yes, I wasn't sure those rules would apply on AirPass or US. What is the current status? Are you aware of this fact? So, EASA don't say directly that we need to use D178C, but in the special condition, if we apply the safety analysis methodology, the IRP as presented by Antonio at the beginning, the failure condition to have an answer to the failure condition, we have only a link with the criticality level of the D178C. In the certified category, I think the D178C will be mandatory, and the D1. Our conviction is the D178C will be necessary for the highest level of the drone in the specific category.
Yeah.
So we are discussing with EASA at this level. We are proposing to them an implementation of a methodology from risk analysis to getting the standards needed to implement the software. And I think that for the highest level of the specific category, the D178C will be applied.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to add something else. In EUROCAE, we are involved in this working group 117. They're dealing with a light version of the D178C, let's say how to relax D178C to be implemented in low risk UAS. And I can tell you that there is currently, ongoing this process. But in the end, if they're gonna release any new version, let's call it a D178D. Well, EUROCAE has a different naming for that coding for the standards. But let's say that we're gonna end up with a D178D. That would be something that will happen between. Will be like making more categories between C and D. C, D, B, something in between. Will be making C, let's say down C, easier, but in the end, everything will be based on that. And why is based on that is because D178C is linked with ARP 4754A and
Exactly.
safety that. And if they want to change it and throw it to, start from scratch, they have to do the same with the other standards, and we don't want to do that, obviously. And at the same time, I'll tell you that this software qualification quality process is aligned with other standards in the market. I mean, even from other industries like automotive, energy, nuclear. I mean, all that stuff is also medical. So all of them are also aligned with the D178C. So if they want to change it, they're not going to give you a do whatever you want. They will tell you something that will be aligned with these standards.
But today, the risk analysis methodology that are pushed by EASA, by EUROCAE, are typically IRP methodology. You can find, for example, EUROCAE, you can see, for example, the ED 279. This is a guideline how to put into practice an FHA for US. So we can't apply an ARP, an avionics IRP methodology with some adaptation to drones, and then say, okay, I'm going to apply an ISO 26262, which is an automotive standards. Even, let's say, 70% of the activity are the same. So that's why we think, and we have some contacts also in EASA, that the D178C will be let's say, normal. The application of D170C will be normal if in the safety analysis we would be apply avionics standards. That is.
Yeah.
Another questions?
Well, there's a question, which is the legislation to apply in case you want to certify an unmanned platform from manned aircraft? So you're talking about a conversion from manned to unmanned. Okay. So the answer is, well, it depends on what is the initial certification of the manned aircraft. It is CS23, if it's CS27, if it's a neutral-like aircraft, no, first of all. But the idea is that you can issue and supplemental type certificate. I mean, the idea will be more or less the same. You have to replace the pilot from the pilot to a machine in the end, and put the pilot on the ground, and build all the ground segment. So you have to add all these systems, and you have to qualify all of them, and you will be iteratively doing step by step the required qualification demonstrations showing compliance to the authorities in order to migrate from the manned aircraft to the manned aircraft. We're talking about a manned aircraft. I'm not talking about OPV. OPV is something else. Optional pilot is something else. But to manned to unmanned, in the end, you will be doing, first of all, I'm assuming, you have something that will be piloted first, then you will use UI STC, then you will have certain modifications. That will be one point when you remove completely the pilot from the aircraft, and they will start flying autonomously. So sorry, unmanned. So in this stage, you probably go for a TC, so a new TC. No, probably not. For sure, you will go for a TC because it's a major change on the aircraft configuration. Doing that, which regulations you have to apply? The answer is probably not. For sure, you have to build that regulation from scratch. What I'm saying is that there are plenty of standards already in the market. I mean, the market available, like NATO standards. You have special conditions like UAS. You have other provided by JARUS. You have many, let's say, standards you can use as reference. But in the end, depending on the configuration, depending on the missions you're going to do, how you want to implement that, many other things, where you want to fly, you have to write down the requirements or the specifications for your certification. That would be, I mean, so it has to be tailored. If it's for a man, I mean, the conversion from man to unmanned, or is the developing from scratch an unmanned aircraft. I mean, in both cases, it's the same. The only good thing from converting from man to unmanned is that part of this, I don't have the presentation here, I can show you later, but part of the subparts of every CS, of every certification standard, will be covered already by the manned aircraft. Let's say that we're talking about a manned aircraft based on CS-23, so fixed wing, light aircraft, okay, fixed wing. So all the parts regarding the engine, so the power plant, the structure, the design, all that part will be already covered by the manned aircraft specification. So if it's certified under CS-23, means that all these parts, subparts, are already covered and demonstrated by the manufacturer. The only thing you have to redo or rework would be the subpart talking about the systems and equipment. First of all, because the level of criticality is different. You don't have a safety line, which is the pilot on board. You have something else. You have a new segment on the ground. So there will be not just modification of, I think, subpart F of systems and equipment, but also adding some more parts regarding, for example, C2 communications, detect and avoid. There will be some other parts that will be at a ground control station. So there will be subparts added. And with this, let's say, delta initial specification coming from the manned aircraft plus the ones you have to specify for the manned configuration, you go and you face a new TC, a new certificate from scratch, because it's a really big change. The other good thing is that you're having something already done, tested, validated, verified from the manned aircraft, from the legacy manned aircraft.
Other questions? So there is a first question. Just a question, please. Would you share this meeting on internet, the video? So I think that this meeting was registered. So we didn't decide, but I said yes, we can put it on internet. We will discuss after that on how we are going to share it and when and where. So I said yes.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I think we can end this. If you have any more questions, you can always send us an email to me or to us. I mean, it's the same. I haven't said that we are very excited about this partnership because I think we are providing with Pulsar Factory, Submarino, and our help, our support, the right, let's say, infrastructure for any manufacturer to start developing any UAS from scratch. And what I'm saying is that from scratch is like mind that you come up with a really nice solution talking about cargo drones and you don't have any idea how to get there. I'm talking about big cargo drones, or in certified category, for example, 500 kgs, 100 kilograms. You want to get there, you don't have a team, you don't have the organization, you want to start from there. You don't have, and this is very important, that unlike the commercial aviation, you don't have reference projects because it's going to be the first one you're going to develop. I mean, even big manufacturers don't have previous projects where they can get directives, they can get guidelines, they can get requirements, reference requirements. So this will give you the starting point and the starting infrastructure that will allow you to go really fast, and which is really important to avoid any waste. That's the main point. Not to develop something that then later on you have to throw to the rubbish bin. Okay.
So thank you. As said, Antonio, if you have any question, don't hesitate to send us an email to contact us. We'll be happy to give you answers.
Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone. Thanks, Amin.
Thank you. Thank you, Antonio.
Bye-bye.
Thanks to all. Bye-bye.